could tell him that I have never regretted being a judge. I think it's the best job in the world, but it's hardly the easiest. Especially if you're a trial judge, you are there by yourself making the decision. You have to make the call. And you decide whether a person literally lives or dies, or whether they are guilty of a criminal offense that will send them to prison for decades versus walking out the door free. It might be an accusation of a rape where you've only got two people, the purported victim and the purported perpetrator, with no physical evidence. It comes down to literally, who do you believe? Who's more credible? And these can be tremendously difficult calls. Child custody. In a divorce, you never get the easy one, the saint and the sinner. They're either both saints or they're both sinners. And sadly, all too often they're both sinners, and you have to pick the least lousy parent to place the children with. So I think, though, to be a judge, you have to have two essential elements. You have to be able to make up your mind, and fairly quickly, because there's usually a large volume of cases. And secondly, you have to have the ability not to second guess your decision, because if you second guess your decision, you're going to drive yourself crazy, and beyond that, there's more cases coming, and you need to focus on those cases coming down the docket.
If you have a need for a lot of attention, if you're thinking that this gives you a chance to exploit your ambitions, your egotistical ambitions, and those kinds of things, I would advise you to not become a judge, because in my view, the ideal judge keeps a low profile and reminds himself and herself all the time, you're not the show. This isn't about you. This isn't about what you're going to say or do. This is about the clients and the lawyers. It's their show. And your job is to keep the rules and make a fair ruling without any ostentation and without any of the, sometimes what you see is from some judges is that they think they're the show. They think that they're the ringmaster, and they're not. And so I hope that people who want to be judges remember that it's a humbling job. It's a very humbling job when someone stands before you for sentencing, and their family's behind them, and they're weeping, and the children don't want to see their dad or their mother go away, and you have to make a decision that no human being should have to make about that person's life. We don't want egotistical judges in those positions. We want people who say, dear God, but for the grace of God, go I, or go my child, and to be reminded of that every time that they put the robe on.
First is it's hard work to do it right. It isn't just showing up. You have to show up ready, having reviewed whatever issues are in front of you, having studied whatever briefs or materials are submitted to you, and then if you're not satisfied with understanding it from that, you go out on your own and do research. And you spend whatever amount of time it takes to do that. You have to study it, make a decision, and move on. We all have cases that we remember, but the lawyers remember cases a lot more than we do because of just the volume of the cases we look at, and we make a decision and move on.
Well, first of all, I would tell them, get a broad base of experience. South Dakota is generally a general practitioner kind of state. Although our lawyers specialize, when you get to court, the judge is a general practitioner. The judge has to hear every kind of case that comes in the door. So if a young lawyer wants to be a judge, I think it's good that you try to get experience in criminal law, in probate states, in civil law, especially in litigation, in all the different areas, and that you then work hard and try to make yourself a reputation as a good lawyer.
Well, again, the first thing is take a look at it to see if it's something that you're really going to be happy at. Because the practice of law is stressful, but so is judging. But it's a different kind of stress. And there's financial considerations. A lot of judges don't make as much money as the lawyers do. And so there's financial sacrifices. That's the bad news for the judge. The good news is there's a tremendous retirement system. So that's a trade-off. But I think that if I were in those shoes, I would go visit with a couple, 3 judges that I know well and comfortable to talk to and see what they say, because they're going to know my situation better than I am sitting here in this chair now. Someone who is very rigid, inflexible, someone who isn't willing to look at both sides, someone who has a natural bias, someone who is a terrible listener. Being a judge involves a lot of listening, and a good lawyer is a tremendous advocate and is accustomed to doing a lot of talking, but that isn't necessarily an attribute of a good judge.
I think you have to analyze what your temperament is. It's very important to have to really work at a certain kind of temperament. Some people have it, some people don't have it. For instance, there are people that we know, some people are in my own family, who's like, they would make a terrible judge because everything is advocacy. And they aren't able to set the advocacy part of the legal profession aside to sit and be fair and impartial to both sides. And so I think you need a temperament. You need the right temperament. If you don't have it, you really need to kind of look at yourself and what you like to do and what you don't like to do. There's a lot of, you have to have a lot of patience. There's patience that you need for the litigants in front of you. There's patience that you need for the lawyers in front of you. It's just important that you become, if you don't have it, that you really work hard on becoming a patient person. And most of us, I think, that have been in the legal profession, we aren't necessarily patient people. We want something done, and we want it done right now. Well, that doesn't always happen, and you have to be patient. And if somebody wants to present you with all kinds of information that they think is relevant and is relevant to their case, it is their case. And it's very important that you have that kind of patience and tolerance for people. So I think you have to have a certain amount of part of your personality or what you like. I think you have to like people. I think if you don't like people and you prefer to work alone and that people's problems frustrate you, then obviously that should not be what you would go into whatsoever. If you like problem solving, I think that's a good thing that you need as a judge, because a lot of cases, particularly, well, on all levels, you are really kind of problem solving. And that's one of the items that you might look at. And I think it takes a lot of personal analysis of who you are, what's your personality, what do you have the patience for, do you really like the law, do you really like people, or what's that? And then I asked the same question of my friend R.D. Judge Hurd, when I first applied for a judge. I said, what do you think? Tell me about being a judge and what you need to do and what I should be thinking about. And he said, He said the biggest thing that a judge needs to do is to be able to decide something. And he said the judges that get in trouble have difficulty making a decision. And we all know we've met judges like that. They can't make a decision. Work piles up, they keep putting it aside because it's difficult, and they have a difficulty making a decision. And sometimes you don't know that until you actually get on the court, unfortunately. He said, if you make a decision, that's the number one thing you have to do. Because, they're all in there and they're looking at you and they've all argued and you go, whoops, I guess I'm the one that needs to make this decision. And there aren't lots of decisions aren't necessarily clear cut. They're very gray, so you have to be able to weigh the information and then at some point just say, I got to make the decision and make it.
Well, there's a difference between the appellate court and the trial court. Some very good trial judges, both at the state and at the federal level, would not be necessarily that happy on the appellate bench because it is a lonesome life, as it were. So different personalities might gravitate to the trial bench, either state or federal, and then would gravitate to the appellate court. But all of the qualities there, getting ready for it, well, obviously develop a good reputation as a good lawyer. Not only a good lawyer, participate as much as you possibly can in local and community events. Like in Aberdeen, I served on the City Planning Commission, and I think and then when I was on the state Supreme Court, I was district chairman of the Boy Scouts of America of that district for a few years. I, growing up on the farm, had never been to the Boy Scouts, and so I envied the opportunity my sons had. And I was on the local library board. Be involved in community events because it broadens your view of your community as a lawyer. It makes you a better rounded person. And those are things that the appointing officials look at. How involved was this person? You might be the most brilliant person in the world, but if you've developed a reputation as being a recluse and being hard to get along with and unsociable and uncommunicative, you basically should not be on the bench to start with.